The flyer arrived in the dead of night, tucked beneath their doors like a harbinger of shadows. It was an invitation, mysterious and alluring, promising a chance at a life-changing fortune. 7 strangers, drawn together by the promise of unimaginable wealth, each with their own story, their own desperation. $1 million, the prize for winning a virtual reality game unlike any other. A sum that could erase debts, heal wounds, and offer a fresh start. A game they believed would change their lives forever. They gathered, each clutching their flyer, eyes filled with hope and trepidation. There was Sarah, the struggling artist, haunted by her past failures, seeking redemption through her art. John, a former soldier, bearing the scars of war both visible and unseen, looking for peace in a world that had forgotten him. Maria, a doctor, grappling with a fatal mistake that stole her career, hoping to find a way to forgive herself. Liam, a Wall Street tycoon, drowning in the guilt of his ruthless ambition, seeking a chance to make amends. Ava, a young woman escaping an abusive relationship, her spirit as fragile as a broken bird, yearning for freedom and safety. David, a recluse, seeking solace from a world that terrified him, hoping to find a place where he could belong. And Emily, a journalist, chasing a story that could redeem her flagging career, driven by a need to prove herself. The address led them to the abandoned Blackwood Heights, a skeletal skyscraper piercing the city's heart like a forgotten promise. It stood tall and foreboding, a monument to decay and neglect. A monument to decay. Its windows were vacant eyes staring out at the world, reflecting the emptiness within. Each gust of wind whispered tales of neglect, carrying with it the scent of dust and something ancient, something unsettling. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding. The lobby was a tomb of broken dreams, a silent witness to the passage of time and the decay of ambition. Cobwebs draped the once grand chandeliers, and dust lay thick on the marble floors, a testament to years of abandonment. A single elevator, its metallic groan echoing through the silence, served as their only means of ascent. It was an old, creaky contraption, adding to the eerie atmosphere. As the elevator creaked its way up, a chill snaked down Sarah's spine. She could feel the weight of the building's history pressing down on her. She wasn't alone. A collective unease had settled over the group, a shared sense of dread that they couldn't shake off, a shared premonition that they were stepping not into a game, but into something far more sinister. The air was thick with tension, and each floor they passed seemed to echo with the ghosts of the past. The elevator shuddered to a halt on the 3rd floor. A crackle of static and a voice devoid of warmth filled the air. It came from a vintage tape recorder, perched precariously on a dusty table. "Welcome, players," the voice rasped, every word dripping with a honeyed malice. "The rules are simple. Survive. Each floor will present you with a challenge, a reflection of your deepest fears. The last one standing claims the prize. Quitting is not an option. Refusal to play is not an option." The tape clicked to a stop, leaving behind a silence thick with unspoken dread. The players exchanged uneasy glances, their faces illuminated by the pale moonlight filtering through the grimy windows. The game had begun. The apartment was an inferno. Flames danced across the walls, licking at the furniture, casting grotesque shadows that writhed and twisted like demons. The heat was unbearable, a relentless force that seemed to consume everything in its path, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. Sarah stumbled back, a scream trapped in her throat. The heat was suffocating, the air thick with the smell of smoke and burning flesh. She could barely see through the dense, acrid smoke that filled the room, making her eyes water and her lungs burn with every breath. This wasn't real, she told herself, her heart pounding against her ribs. It was a hallucination, a trick of the mind. But no matter how many times she repeated it, the terror that gripped her felt all too real, as if the flames were reaching out to pull her into their fiery embrace. But the heat felt real. The fear that clawed at her insides felt terrifyingly real. She could feel the sweat trickling down her face, the intense heat making her skin prickle, and her heart race even faster. She wasn't alone. Through the smoke, she saw them, Figures engulfed in flames, their screams reaching her like echoes from a nightmare. The sight was horrifying, a scene straight out of her worst fears, her parents. Trapped in the inferno that had consumed their home, their pleas for help forever seared into her memory. She could see their faces, twisted in agony, their voices calling out to her, begging for salvation. "Help us!" Their voices cried out, distorted by the flames, their outstretched hands disappearing into the inferno. "Sarah, please!" The desperation in their voices was heart-wrenching, a sound that would haunt her forever. Sarah sank to her knees, her screams swallowed by the roaring flames. The weight of her guilt and grief was overwhelming, pressing down on her like a physical force. The guilt, the grief she had suppressed for years, rose up and threatened to drown her. She had tried to bury it, to move on, but in this moment it all came rushing back with a vengeance. As the flames died down, leaving behind only ashes and the echo of her screams, Sarah knew. She knew that this was more than just a nightmare. It was a reckoning, a confrontation with the past she had tried so hard to forget. This game wasn't just about surviving. It was about confronting the demons that lurked in the shadows of their souls. It was about facing the truth, no matter how painful, and finding a way to move forward. The fourth floor was a stark contrast to the inferno below. The air was thick with tension, a silence that screamed louder than any chaos. A sterile, white hospital room, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and fear. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating in their starkness. Maria froze in the doorway, her blood turning to ice. She had seen many things, but nothing prepared her for this moment. A heart monitor beeped a steady rhythm, a counterpoint to the chaos erupting inside her. Each beep was a reminder of the fragile line between life and death. On the bed lay a young boy, his face pale, his chest rising and falling with each shallow breath. He looked so fragile, so breakable. But it was the look in his eyes, the fear that mirrored her own, that sent a shiver down her spine. It was him, the boy she had failed, the boy she couldn't save. The weight of her failure pressed down on her, a burden she could never escape. The boy whose death had haunted her every waking moment, his face etched into the back of her eyelids. She saw him in every shadow, every reflection. "It's your fault," whispered a voice, cold and accusing. The words cut through her like a knife, reopening wounds that had never truly healed. It slithered through the room, wrapping around her like a shroud. "You let him die." The accusation was a serpent, coiling tighter with each passing second. Maria stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. The room spun, her vision blurring with tears she refused to shed. The guilt, the shame she had tried to bury, threatened to consume her. It was a relentless tide, pulling her under, drowning her in regret. She could see the despair in the boy's eyes, feel the weight of his life slipping away. Each moment replayed in her mind, a cruel reminder of her failure. This floor wasn't a game. It was a battleground, a place where the stakes were life and death. It was a confession booth, a place where her sins were laid bare for all to see. There was no hiding, no escape from the truth.